Jasmine Crockett didn't come to the Sunday panel looking for a confrontation. The show's producers had given the usual rundown, a few talking points on inflation, some time on the presidential race, and maybe a quick detour into foreign policy. Nothing out of the ordinary. But everything shifted the moment Donald Trump's video feed crackled to life. Sitting in front of an American flag with his familiar bravado, he leaned in and said something that made the entire studio flinch. Barack Obama committed treason. Everyone knows it. Asterisk, it wasn't just the words, it was the confidence. The calm delivery of a baseless accusation, leveled without evidence, against a former president who remains one of the most respected figures in modern American history. The claim echoed through the panel like a thrown stone across still water. Some of the commentators seemed unsure how to respond. The host looked down at her notes, searching for the next topic, perhaps hoping someone else would diffuse the moment. But it was Jasmine Crockett who spoke first. She didn't hesitate. Asterisk, you can't just throw around words like treason because you don't like someone, she said evenly, her tone clear but not theatrical. That word has a meaning. It carries legal consequences. It carries historical. Wait, asterisk, she didn't shout. She didn't roll her eyes or lean back with exaggerated disbelief. Instead, she sat up straighter, calm and deliberate. Her voice cut through the noise precisely because it didn't match the usual tone of political bickering. This wasn't just about defending Barack Obama. It was about defending truth and language itself from being twisted for political theater. Asterisk, in calling out Trump's accusation, Crockett made it clear that baseless charges, especially ones as serious as treason, aren't just political grenades tossed for attention. They're dangerous, they inflame, they distract, and when left unchallenged, they erode public trust in everything from our institutions to our collective understanding of right and wrong. Asterisk, she reminded viewers, without needing to lecture, that Barack Obama had served 2 full terms without a criminal indictment, without corruption scandals, and without any credible allegations of betraying the country. And yet here was someone, with a massive platform, throwing out an accusation as casually as if he were commenting on a sports score. Crockett made it personal not because she brought her emotions into it, but because she understood the weight of history and the danger of forgetting it. Asterisk, there are people watching this show right now, she said, gesturing gently to the camera, who hear that word and assume it must mean something, that maybe there's something there, but it doesn't. Not this time, and it's reckless to pretend otherwise. Asterisk, by calmly addressing the accusation head-on, Crockett did something more impactful than yelling or storming off would have achieved. She reframed the conversation in real time. She didn't let the moment pass. She didn't let the falsehood fester, and in doing so, she showed that there is still space on live television for a reasoned, direct pushback even when the source of the outrage is a former president. Asterisk. Her ability to remain composed only underscored her message. She didn't call names. She didn't resort to sarcasm. She used the moment to educate, to draw a line, and to remind the audience and her fellow panelists that politics should not be theater of the absurd. And when someone tries to drag it there, it takes courage to stand up, mid-broadcast, and say, this isn't acceptable. Asterisk, the most striking part of her response wasn't just the content, but the clarity. She wasn't trying to score points. She wasn't posturing for a viral moment. She was, quite simply, doing what more people in politics should do. Speak truthfully, stand firm, and refuse to let dishonest narratives go unchecked. Her words may have been aimed at one man's outrageous statement, but they carried a broader warning about how far we've let misinformation go, and how urgently we need to stop it in its tracks. Asterisk. As Jasmine Crockett continued, she didn't just push back on the false accusation against Barack Obama, she turned the camera lens squarely onto the man who made it. Without raising her voice, she made a point that resonated far beyond the studio walls. If anyone wanted to talk about betrayal, lawlessness, or undermining American democracy, they needed to start by looking at Donald Trump himself. Asterisk, it wasn't name-calling. It wasn't personal spite. It was a clean, fact, unpacking of Trump's own record laid bare for everyone watching. Crockett pointed out, calmly but unmistakably, that Donald Trump was the only modern president to leave office under the shadow of a violent insurrection. January 6 wasn't ancient history. It wasn't politics as usual. It was a moment when American democracy teetered, and Trump was at the center of it, cheering on the very chaos that threatened to undo a peaceful transition of power. Asterisk, you're accusing Barack Obama of treason, she asked, tilting her head ever so slightly. Meanwhile, the only president in recent memory who encouraged a mob to march on the Capitol is you. Asterisk, there, it was a mirror held up to the source of the accusation. No theatrics, just facts. Asterisk. Jasmine didn't stop there. She referenced the ongoing investigations that had clouded Trump's post-presidency. She alluded to the boxers of classified documents recovered from Mar-a-Lago, the Georgia phone call, the hush money indictments. She didn't need to dive into every detail. Most viewers already knew the headlines. But she reminded the audience that the man throwing around words like treason was himself facing a legal gauntlet that most Americans would never come close to experiencing. Asterisk, let's talk about the real meaning of accountability, she continued. Barack Barack Obama wasn't impeached, and not once. He wasn't indicted. He didn't leave office with investigations trailing behind him. He didn't encourage anyone to question the legitimacy of elections. That's not just a contrast. That's a wake-up call. Asterisk, and that was the heart of her argument. The staggering hypocrisy. The irony of hearing Donald Trump, of all people, suggest that someone else had betrayed the United States government. Crockett wasn't rattled by his accusation. She was offended by the guy, because while Trump was throwing around terms with serious legal implications, he himself was treating the law like it was optional. Asterisk, you called the Georgia Secretary of State and asked him to find votes. She said, that's not leadership. That's desperation. That's tampering. That's potentially criminal. And yet, here we are, listening to you accuse a man who respected the law of breaking it. The projection is astounding. Asterisk, Trump attempted to interject, waving off the comments as fake news and Democrat spin. But Jasmine wasn't flustered. She simply looked into the camera and said, it's not spin when it's on video. It's not fake when it's your own voice on the recording. Asterisk, that moment wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy, but it carried weight, because for so long, Trump had dominated political conversations with spectacle. He understood how to stir outrage, how to grab headlines, how to pull the spotlight back onto himself, even if it meant tossing truth aside. But Crockett wasn't playing his game. She was changing the rules, entirely anchoring the conversation in facts, and refusing to let emotion override clarity. Asterisk, she pointed out something else. 2. Trump's persistent pattern of deflection. Whenever he's under fire, whether for mishandling documents, undermining the election, or facing indictment, he shifts the conversation. He attacks someone else. He points fingers. And often, he targets people who represent what he fears: integrity, competence, and credibility. Barack Obama fits that mold perfectly. Asterisk, every time your legal troubles get worse, Jasmine said, you bring up Obama. It's like clockwork. You're not trying to inform the public, you're trying to distract them. Asterisk, her words weren't meant for just the former president. They were meant for the millions watching at home, many of whom had grown weary of the endless cycle of accusation, denial, and distraction. Crockett was doing what too few have the courage to do on live television. Hold up the record, compare actions to words, and call out the gaslighting for what it is. Asterisk, in that moment, Trump's attempt to reframe himself as the victim or the patriot fell flat. Because Jasmine Crockett reminded everyone that the man hurling accusations of treason had spent the last several years pushing conspiracy theories, cozying up to authoritarian figures, and treating the U.S. legal system like a nuisance. Asterisk. When Jasmine Crockett finished her takedown of Donald Trump's baseless accusation, something unusual happened, not in the studio, but across the country. The reaction wasn't marked by loud celebration or viral rage. Instead, it was a wave of respect. It came quietly at first, from political commentators and viewers online, but it spread quickly. People weren't praising her because she had landed some viral zinger or humiliated someone on air. They were responding to how she handled the moment with calm, logic, and undeniable truth. Asterisk. As the clip of the exchange circulated online, it didn't look like the usual viral political showdown. There were no fireworks, no shouting match. It wasn't edited into a meme or laced with sound effects. It was just Jasmine Crockett, calmly but firmly pushing back on a lie that had no business being aired in the first place. She didn't try to outseal Donald Trump. She didn't interrupt or insult him. She dismantled his argument with composure and facts. Asterisk, that approach struck a nerve. On social media platforms like X and TikTok, people from all backgrounds, independents, even a few moderate conservatives were sharing the clip and offering praise. The reason was simple. They were tired. Tired of political theater, tired of the noise, tired of watching falsehoods go unchallenged, just because they came from a former president. Crockett offered something different. She was grounded, and that groundedness cut through the chaos. Asterisk. Even many who didn't typically align with her politically gave her credit for not taking the bait. Trump has a well-established strategy: outrage, dominate attention, and force his opponents to either play defense or look unhinged, trying to match his energy. But Jasmine didn't play that game. She stayed calm. She stayed focused. And in doing so, she flipped the script. Asterisk, viewers commented that it was refreshing to see a politician who didn't try to match Trump's volume, but instead countered him with quiet confidence. People respected that she didn't perform. Explained. She pointed to Trump's record without embellishment and used his own actions to make her case. The impact wasn't in the delivery, it was in the substance. Asterisk. That's what made the moment stand out. It wasn't about scoring points in a partisan war. It was about demonstrating what public accountability should look like in real time. The bar had been lowered so far in political discourse that simply telling the truth without theatrics felt revolutionary. Crockett didn't need a clever bite. Her clarity was the headline. Asterisk, the response from media professionals underscored this shift. Journalists praised her for keeping the conversation on track. Editorials highlighted how rare it is to see someone stick to facts in the face of blatant misinformation. especially when that misinformation comes from a figure as powerful and idiot-savvy as Donald Trump. Asterisk, and it wasn't just mainstream outlets reacting. Political podcasts, YouTube creators, and civic organizations picked up on the moment. They pointed out that Crockett wasn't just defending Obama, she was defending truth itself. The idea that words matter. That charges like treason can't just be thrown around like campaign slogans. That the public deserves better than a constant stream of distractions from people trying to escape accountability. Asterisk, even though skeptical of politicians in general, noted that Crockett's demeanor added credibility to her response. If she had reacted with outrage or snark, the story might have been dismissed as just another political fight. But her calm dismantling of Trump's accusation made it impossible to ignore. She didn't appear as someone trying to win. She came across as someone who simply couldn't let a dangerous lie pass, unchallenged. That authenticity resonated. The entire moment offered a glimpse of what political discourse could be if honest, rooted in facts, and free of performative outrage. Jasmine Crockett didn't just respond to Donald Trump, she reset the conversation. And by doing so, she showed that standing firm with facts still has power. Even in a political world dominated by spectacle, asterisk, her composure, far from making her seem passive, became her strength. It gave weight to every word she said, and that's why people listened. That's why the moment stuck. Because in an environment where so many voices shout past each other, she chose to speak with the country took notice. Asterisk. Jasmine Crockett's handling of Donald Trump's wild accusation wasn't just a defense of Barack Obama, was a reflection of something deeper. The arrival of a new generation of political leaders who aren't afraid to confront falsehoods directly, and who don't hesitate to speak plainly. Even when the person on the other end is a former president with a massive following, her presence on that stage, her response, and her refusal to let the moment pass without correction marked a shift in how political truth is defended in public spaces. Asterisk, for years, Donald Trump has shaped public discourse through spectacle, often overwhelming his critics by dominating the conversation with controversial statements, personal insults, and false claims delivered with unwavering confidence. Many of his opponents in Washington, especially those of an older guard, struggled to respond. They either ignored him, hoping not to fan the flames, or got pulled into his world of reactive, combative back and forths. But Crockett didn't fit that mold. Her response was different. It was clear, pointed, and grounded not in performance, but in principle. Asterisk, this generational shift isn't just about age. It's about a new approach to power, responsibility, and public dialogue. Jasmine Crockett represents a growing number of elected officials who aren't intimidated by the traditional rules of political engagement, who understand that silence can often be mistaken for agreement, and that in the modern media landscape, falsehoods repeated without pushback can become normalized. Her decision to directly respond to Trump's claim wasn't about scoring political points. It was about setting a boundary. There are still things that are too outrageous, too dishonest, too let slide. Asterisk, and what made her stand out wasn't just that she responded, but how she responded. She didn't bring talking points, she brought historical memory and real accountability. When Trump tried to label Obama a traitor, she didn't respond with shock or anger. She responded with context, reminding viewers not just of Obama's clean record, but of Trump's own troubling legacy. She brought up January 6th, not as a rhetorical device, but as a fact of history. She mentioned the investigations, the indictments, and the ongoing legal troubles Trump is facing, not to smear him, but to illustrate the staggering irony of his accusation. Asterisk, this kind of clarity, delivered without condescension or emotional theatrics, is what sets leaders like Crockett apart. She understands the value of a firm voice in an age of noise. Trump has long relied on chaos and making statements so outrageous that people are too stunned or too overwhelmed to respond. But Crockett didn't flinch. She spoke directly, looking not just at him, but through the lens into the eyes of the viewers at home, and that confidence, that certainty signals a change in who gets to control the narrative. Asterisk. Jasmine Crockett doesn't come from the world of careful political triangulation. She doesn't dodge, she confronts. And when someone like Donald Trump tries to throw around a word like treason with no evidence, she understands what's at stake if that rhetoric goes unchallenged. The word doesn't just float in the air, it sticks, it spreads. It shapes how people view their country, their leaders, and the legitimacy of their institutions. Her refusal to let that slide wasn't just good television, it was responsible leadership. Asterisk. That kind of leadership is becoming more common among newer voices in Congresspeople who aren't waiting for permission to speak plainly, and who don't believe in being polite to power when power is being misused. For too long, politics has rewarded those who speak carefully, who hedge, who choose comfort over confrontation. But leaders like Crockett are showing that real strength lies in directness. Not shouting, not posturing, but simply refusing to let lies sit in silence. Asterisk, the fact that Trump made such a dramatic accusation wasn't surprising. He's built a political brand on provoking outrage and dominating news cycles. What was surprising, what was refreshing, was seeing someone challenge him without losing control, without lowering themselves, and without letting him dictate the terms of the conversation. Jasmine Crockett's performance that day didn't just expose the hollowness of Trump's claim. It exposed the strength of a new kind of leadership, one that doesn't wait for the perfect moment to tell the truth, but recognizes that the moment is the message. By stepping up in that moment and delivering a response that was factual, confident, and steady, Crockett showed that the era of Trump being the loudest voice in the room may be starting to fade, not because others are shouting louder, but because they've stopped being afraid to call out the noise for what it is. Jasmine Crockett's response to Donald Trump's baseless accusation wasn't just a memorable TV moment, it was a defining one. It demonstrated that the rules of political engagement are changing, and that new voices in American politics aren't afraid to speak truth to power, even when that power comes in the form of a former president who still commands a loyal following and headlines with ease. What made her words resonate wasn't volume or drama, it was precision, it was courage, and most importantly, it was clarity in a time when misinformation often goes unchecked in real time. Her approach stood out not because she shocked the audience, but because she brought the conversation back to where it should be: truth, accountability, and standards. She reminded the nation that serious words like treason can't be thrown around like confetti to distract from legal troubles or win political favor. She reminded us that being a leader means having the backbone to say no when a lie is broadcast as truth. In a moment that could have easily turned chaotic, Crockett stayed grounded. She didn't engage in a shouting match. She didn't play to the cameras or search for a viral clip. Instead, she chose to protect the integrity of the conversation. And in doing so, she gained widespread respect not just from supporters, but from people across the political spectrum who are tired of noise and hungry for honesty. It's easy in today's political environment to let comments like Trump's slide. Many politicians do it to avoid backlash or to preserve their place in the media cycle. But Crockett showed that avoiding discomfort isn't leadership. Real leadership is knowing when to speak, how to speak, and having the conviction to stand up when it matters most. And make no mistake, her words did matter. They reminded the audience, both in the studio and across the country, that truth still has a place in public discourse, and that dignity doesn't have to be sacrificed in the name of ratings. She didn't just stand up for Barack Obama, she stood up for every American who believes that facts still matter, that history should be respected, and that we must hold those in power to the same standards they so easily demand of others. As the clip of her remarks continues to circulate, it's clear that Jasmine Crockett isn't just a rising voice in Congress, she's a reminder of what leadership looks like when it's rooted in principle. She didn't just respond to Trump, she redefined the conversation. And for many watching, that was